Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vikas Pota. I'm the founder of T4. I get invited to so many discussions about the future of education that I've almost stopped taking calls and in responding to emails on this subject, simply because they often take place in a vacuum, which actually don't really reflect or resemble the kinds of areas or the kinds of thoughts that I kind of have. And so entering into these discussions sometimes just feels like you know a spiral that you get into of intellectual conversation that really has no effect on the ground. And yes, whilst I accept that some of that is required for to dream up what is possible, to push the boundaries of intellectual thought and all those kinds of things, one of the things that I have been thinking about recently has been around this very vexed question of the impact of the pandemic on education. And even prior to it, as you will know, as SDG advocates, that we're already behind on these targets, and the pandemic has come along and actually compounded the problems that we all face in such a significant way that places like the World Bank and institutions like this put this in trillions of dollars of learning losses that have taken place. Not that you should just measure in dollars, but certainly we understand that by having school closures, education stopped. And for that reason, there are these gaps that will emerge over in the fullness of time that will have a detrimental impact on society. There's some countries that have just now recently returned back to schooling. Maybe 2 years out of a child's life has been absolutely education hasn't taken place. And so when you think about this, naturally speaking, we have to think about how we transform education. And this is where the UN, last month organized a pre-summit to an event that's taking place in September at the UN General Assembly that is called Transforming Education. And it's quite interesting when you talk about trying to transform education. It's quite interesting the kind of people that you invite to these discussions. And one of the things from my previous experiences I can tell you is that whilst there's an immense number of policymakers, think tankers, so-called experts. The one thing that I do realize every time and at every opportunity is how schools, how teachers, how learners are hardly represented in these discussions in person. And so what I wanted to do today was actually bring on two friends of mine, country ambassadors for T4, to come in and weigh in on this subject about, firstly, what is the transformation that has happened over the pandemic in their classrooms, in their schools, and then ask them for their thoughts on, well, how do we transform education at scale? And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Lynn Thomas and Sophia Kouzouli to our T4 TV today. Lynn, welcome. Sophia, welcome. You heard my introduction, and what we want to talk about is what the impacts of the pandemic are. And I want to start with you, Lynn, in particular. What impact has the pandemic had on your students?
Well, there was a lot of school closures and forced to online learning in various forms here in Ontario. And the impact on students, for a lot of them, they just couldn't do the online. They didn't like it. They weren't prepared to be more independent like that. There were a lot of issues with tech and internet accessibility, bandwidth. A lot of the online learning involved like video calls, and their internet couldn't handle it. So there was a lot of inequities in that manner, and a lot of, I would say, probably mental wellness issues surrounding going online.
But tell me, Lynn, you say this that and of course we read about all of these inequities that have resulted as a
Mhm.
through the pandemic, through by not having devices, by not having connectivity, by not having resources. But what is the impact of that on your children, on the students in your classroom, and on teachers?
I'm noticing a lot more stress um, in teachers and students. I also, this past year, because we were back face to face, um, it's odd. I found a general apathy, perhaps, with, and I teach high school, so it may be very different in an elementary setting, but um, a, definitely an apathy with students. But more than that, I noticed that many of them really were not necessarily behind in academically,
Hmm.
but definitely there were gaps in their learning skills,
And so
managing their time, and getting onto an assignment, that initiative. So they seem very apathetic, very put it off till later, procrastinating, and a lot quieter. They didn't converse. It was really hard to get discussions going in class, which I found odd because counterintuitive. You'd think
hmm.
they'd be excited to share, but they weren't.
Thank you for sharing that, Lynn. Sophia, in terms of like when you think about teaching practice, I mean, you're a teacher in a school in Greece. How has your teaching practice changed as a result of the pandemic?
First of all, I would like to agree with Lynn about the problems with connectivity and with the devices. So in order to cope with all that, I definitely focused on changing practices, teaching practices, and we're exploring new practices. So practices which we had talked about them before the COVID, but then in 1 week we had to cope with that in actual reality. So I used a lot of flipped classroom techniques, but students weren't aware of these techniques actually. So there was a problem coping with this, watching the video first and then going discussing about it during the virtual during the lesson in the virtual class. And there was another, I focused a lot on designing content that would cater for their needs and the characteristics of their age. I work at the primary school, so I had to deal with first graders, second graders. It was very difficult for them to talk through the computer, to interact through the computer. So I had to design my own content, build my own content, and use it. I needed to focus more on interaction with the students because this is what they missed a lot, and we had to work on that in order to cope with the social emotional gap that was building up during the pandemic. I tried differentiating the lesson, trying to use individualized techniques for each of the students. So a lot of emails, a lot of using any web tools that I could use, and any forms of technology that safe forms of technology. So I had to make use of and think about what is safety measures I should take for these children, because all these children consider technology as a way to play, to spend their time playing, but now they had to view it in another different aspect, them and their parents, because we had to educate the parents as well, because the parents helped a lot or could not help with all this. So in most of the cases, I sent messages to the parents, explaining to them what I would do in the virtual classroom and the techniques that I would use, so that they could help their children from home to deal with what they had to do in the virtual classroom. I thought a lot about equity, because exactly this was the huge problem, because not all the children could access the content, the material that I uploaded on the e-class, on the digital classroom. And in most of the cases there were 2 or 3 children working in different rooms, so they could not. I could hear my husband talking in the other classroom because he teaches English with the older children of the family. So I mean, it was a real issue. And of course, teaching methodologies always are a big help, and the theoretical background is always a huge help. But the reality was that we had to face a lot of problems there.
I think thank you for sharing that. It's quite interesting. You say that technology is often used by pupils to play and not to learn. I thought that was quite interesting in terms of a nuance that you brought to this. But tell me, in terms of, like, a lot of people say that now that schools are going back and are back rather, do you think what are the hard fought changes that are here to stay as a result of the pandemic? I'd love to get both your perspectives on that question. Maybe I come to you first, Lynn.
Okay, Lynn, yes, thank you.
Sorry. Well, I know I've definitely integrated a lot more mental wellness and social emotional skills support. Obviously, starting that during the pandemic because everyone was stressed, and since then, I've kind of rethought almost everything in my courses with that lens, realizing that it's far more. I mean, it's always been integrated, but now I do it far more explicitly, down to, I've changed policies, within my classroom surrounding assessment and things like that, to be more supportive in that vein. And I think that is definitely something that I will keep, and I think should be integrated across the board more, because we're seeing so many issues surrounding mental health and wellness and those social emotional skills that really suffered because of lack of, that interactivity, as Sophia said. And I think in the end, doing that makes children better learners. I mean, it's hard to have one without the other.
And Sophia, what about you?
Well, one thing is for sure, that technology is here to stay. So I think that we will all use technology, web tools, in a pedagogical way, to help to empower our students with autonomous learning, with inquiry learning, with reflection, because we used all these things during the pandemic to help them reflect and self-assess themselves. So I think that we will work a lot on e-safety and integrating web tools that we could use to help learners connect with each other, connect with schools internationally, locally and internationally, and to help them build this confidence that they need to cope with the unexpected, and with life skills that they will need when they grow up. I mean, what we said before with Lynn, that there was a big gap in the social emotional learning. I noticed that coming back during the last year, we worked mainly in class, in school. So what I noticed is that there was a difficulty for students to stand up, to go around in the classroom, to do some to talk to other students, to work in groups, and we had the masks, of course, so this was another problem. But fortunately, students learn to do it. But I think that we need to work on this. This will stay. Things that we will do to help our students, even web tools that we will use to help our students work on developing competencies and skills in an autonomous way. So this means that we need to equip our schools with computers, laptops, anything that we could use, educate parents and students to work with that, with these in a pedagogical way, in the way that they need to communicate, that they need to take advantage of them to communicate, to interact, to develop social relationship through the computer. I mean, because it's a reality. I mean, we don't know what will happen this year. We are all talking about what this year is going to be like. So technology differentiation in techniques and e-safety are the three things that will stay for sure.
And so Sophia and Lynn, you have lots of friends online at the moment who are saying hello to you. So I'm going to flash up some of the comments. There's a lot of love being shared. I'll start from the top, which is Rosetta from the UK says hello. This gentleman says hello from Kachinland. One of my colleagues, Marin, says hello from Buenos Aires. Vijita says hello from Central India. Musawi is from Kuwait. Nina is from Libya. Our colleague says bonjour from Brentford in London. I think he's being a little bit cheeky. And on it goes. Good afternoon from Abu Dhabi in the UAE. Branka says hello from Serbia. Qasim says hello from Kuwait. Amel is from Tunisia. Adriana is from Serbia. Fred is watching all the way from Ghana. Joanne from South Africa. And on it goes. Kira from Algeria. Metab from Pakistan. Chitra from Malaysia. Yasmin from Egypt. Rajendra says it beautifully, from incredible India. Senzimbele from South Africa. And Minu from India is saying, awesome to see my friends. Olayemi, another country ambassador, saying hello. Kalyani, namaste from India. Suzanne from Egypt. Mirella from Romania. And on greetings from Macedonia. And I love this one. Good vibes, of course, good vibes, but we should all be angry actually more than having good vibes. Tatiana from Romania again. Chris McRae from the UK, I assume, says congratulations everyone. And so Shuli from Bangladesh, Nilufer from Bangladesh. As you can see, you have lots of people who have dialed in or logged in. So well done, both of you. There's a lot of love for what you do. And I'm just going to keep on flashing these up as we go, because I think these are quite important to show that this is quite a global platform. And I want everyone to understand that. Now, because it is a global platform, we should also take substantive comments. So here is Egeleki Papa from Greece, who is, I think, speaking to you, Sophia. Ageleki runs one of the schools that's been long listed in the World's Best School Prizes, saying thank you for your efforts, wonderful teacher from Greece. And we can read that comment later on.
Thank you, Ageleki. She's an amazing educator, an amazing Greek educator.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks to all the colleagues.
And so our previous country ambassador, Elisa from Lebanon, says, great work. Voices should be heard, I think is what you mean. And so when we think about this, when I tell you that the UN convenes a summit called Transforming Education in a few weeks' time in New York, how do you think about transforming education? What words of advice do you have for everyone there? But before you answer that, one of our other country ambassadors unfortunately had a technical glitch and has now joined us. Please welcome Daniel to our call as well. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You're from Ghana, and one of our
Yes,
country
please.
ambassadors there. And so I was asking the ladies, like, what words of advice do you have for those people that are being convened in New York for the UN General Assembly for the Transforming Education Summit? Maybe Lynn, you could channel some of your thoughts more effectively. Tell us what you think.
Well, I really think it's important to listen to educators. Very often, a lot of these conferences, policymakers, etc., um, they talk about doing things in the interest of students, and create policies, but really they're not listening to teachers, and a lot of times the policies can be misguided, um, or they miss the mark completely, um, or the policy is something that wasn't even on the table in educators' minds of something that's needed or necessary. Once in a while they may hit it, but very often it's a talking and not a lot of action. um, they may say this is the great policy, but then they don't provide training or time for educators to learn about this new thing they're bringing on, and just expect us to do it. Or they an example here, there was a lot of talk about, after the lockdowns and such, that students need more mental health help, but then there was really nothing else added. It was just, okay, I guess that's something else on my plate because I don't already have enough, you know. So it's frustrating that educators and administrators, like principals and schools, aren't listened to more about what they actually need.
And so, Sophia, you live in Greece, and you could call it the birthplace of democracy almost, and such noble ideals. And what do you have to say about this? Hold on, you're on mute. Let me just unmute you.
Thank you.
Carry.
I totally agree with Lynn, because policymakers need to listen to teachers. First of all, teachers and students, and then parents and everyone who is involved in education. I mean, because we deal with the everyday reality at school, and we know what our students need and how they cope with the difficulties and the barriers that they have at home, or the difficulties they have to access information, or any other problems they have. So we are the ones that are completely and totally aware of what we are dealing with the everyday barriers our learners have. And most of the times we deal with them before even policymakers are aware of them, because we have to do it. We are there for the children. So I have to say that during the pandemic, I turned to to educate to communities of educators, like the T4 education community, because we totally supported each other, and other communities, because we helped each other with the necessary tools that we could use. And policymakers didn't know about them. I mean, most of the schools are not even equipped with computers, or with they have problems with connectivity. And we are talking about the pedagogical use of technology at the moment. So I would say they want to know what we have to say about it, but they have to take it in consideration. They have to take it in account. They have to take in account what we say, and actually what teachers say should be the first priority for the children, because we care about, we share our daily life with the children, with the learners, and we know what goes on at home with them, what the problems they have. So we could offer solutions there, and we could offer solutions even before the problems arise. We know about equitable education. We know how to, because we deal with it every day. So please listen to us, because we do know what we're talking about.
Daniel, from Ghana, what is your experience of this in terms of, are teachers listened to?
Thank you very much. I salute the two speakers. They've really spoken well. To be frank, our leaders are not listening to we the teachers. Because at the end, we the teachers sit with the children, do everything with them. At the end of the day, the children goes home. The children spend much time with we the teachers from morning to evening. But when it comes to policy making, the teachers are not considered. The policy will come. This is what you have to do. At the end, what comes out, they don't care. Whether the teacher is suffering or not, they has nothing to say. You go home, listen to us. This is the policy. This is what you have to do. That's final. Looking at the pandemic has brought a lot to us, especially Africa. We are far, far behind when it comes to technology. You go to places, even children have not seen computers before, but we are doing computer. We are learning ICT. There's no network, there's no light. But when the policy comes, you have to teach. And at the end, the children gains nothing. So it is high time in this 21st century, they listen to we the teachers, that this is what we need, and this is what we can use to help the children so that their future can be great. Because in the next 5-10 years, maybe the world will not be the pace at which it is today. It will be running faster. So educate.
We'll give him a second. And so, Sophia, I come to you in terms of when I hear you talk about exactly the same points that Daniel and Lynn have been making. Why is it that they don't listen to you?
I don't. I think that there is always an agenda that has to that forgets the people, the stakeholders. That I think that they believe that perhaps we exaggerate, or we think about our own reality and not about the global community. Whereas, as we saw now, we share the same problems. All three of us share the same problems. So I think that although education is a priority, it is not as much of a priority as it should be. I mean, you can see it from the finance aspect. Schools should be given more money to be well equipped, not have too many children in the classroom, so that we can have more educators in the class, so we could use more techniques, more methodologies, and students could be heard, actually, because what can you do in a classroom of 30 students for 45 minutes, and especially when you have 30 different students with different personalities, different needs. So I think it's a matter of finance, first of all, of money. Education should take more money to equip the schools, and with educators, with the appropriate equipment, to build new schools. I mean, that modern schools that where students could have the education they need, and our voices need to be heard. I mean, we should be a priority as well. We need to be a priority.
And so, Lynn, I conclude with you with this question, this one particular question, which is, can you transform education without teachers?
No. I don't think you can. I find a lot of times perhaps policymakers think that they can. They think they know school because they went to school. I'm not sure. but that doesn't make them experts in education. And in the end, teachers will do what they do in the classroom in the best interest of their students, despite whatever policy might be there, right? I know that I've danced around things to make it work for my students when a policy was not really doable. And I agree with Sophia wholeheartedly with the idea that, you know, funding, appropriate funding for schools should be the priority, and it doesn't seem to be in many places. For example, here, people kept talking about, you know, the mental health of students and learning loss and all these things. And all of these studies and the actual educational experts, you know, said, you know, you need to have smaller class sizes because then teachers could actually support students and deal with these things. But it is the last thing that the policymakers want to do or will do. They still haven't done it. In fact, they're trying to make them larger. So again, that boils down to funding. You know, you have to fund more teachers to have smaller class sizes. So yeah, I don't think you can do it without teachers.
Well, on that note, we will be revisiting this conversation a few times before this Transforming Education Summit with other speakers and other guests. And the point I think you are both making, and what Daniel made before he left, was there is no transforming of education without including the teacher and the school, those at the coalface of education, at the front of education, the front lines of education. And so for that, we would like to implore the United Nations, that includes UNESCO, UNICEF, the World Bank, all of these actors, to actually include teacher voices and be considerate and consider them as the experts when it comes to the delivery of education in particular. And so we just hope that you listen, and we hope that the views of teachers like Sophia and Lynn are taken into account. On that note, we wish you well for the rest of this week and look forward to staying in touch. Look forward to the next T4 TV session. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.